Hello everyone and welcome to the Blue Falcon platform. Today we are going to discuss a very serious disease of the eye which is called the glaucoma. The glaucoma is a very serious disease of the eye because it is called the thief of sight. Why is it called that? Because when you find out that you have that disease, it's too late because you have just lost a lot of your vision and the loss of vision is irreversible. In order to understand the glaucoma, we need to remember some of the anatomy of the eye. So that, look at this, the laser pointer I'm pointing, this is the ciliary body where it secretes the aqueous humor. The aqueous humor is a fluid that will flow through the posterior chamber here. The posterior chamber is between the iris and the lens. So the fluid will flow here and pass through the pupil to the anterior chamber between the iris and the cornea until it reaches the angle of the anterior chamber and it will flow. So what happens in glaucoma? What happens is that aqueous humor is the reason responsible for the pressure of the eye. If it increases, it will affect the optic nerve, and affected optic nerve, there will be a loss of vision. So in order to understand the glaucoma, we'll see that 3D prototype. So this is the eye as we see here. Okay, so that is the ciliary body, okay? So the ciliary body as we see here secretes the aqueous humor, okay? And the aqueous humor then will flow through the posterior chamber, which is between the lens and the iris. So it flows through the posterior, through the pupil here to the anterior chamber, okay? Until it reaches the angle of the anterior chamber where it is drained, as you see here. So that is the angle here. So look at this here. This is the flow of the aqueous humor. And if you think of this, you will find out that this aqueous humor is responsible for the IOP, the intraocular pressure inside the eye. So if you look at this picture here, you'll find out that this is a car tire. So what preserves the shape of the car tire? What preserves the pressure inside the car tire? What preserves the function of the car tire? It is the air inside the car tire. So the air inside the car tire is the same as the aqueous humor inside the eye. So you keep saying aqueous humor and glaucoma. Why is that? Okay. So if you look here, this is how the aqueous humor flows inside the eye, and it's drained by an angle which is called the angle of the anterior chamber. But there's any obstruction inside this angle, there's any problem inside the angle, the intraocular pressure inside the eye will increase and it will affect the optic nerve. And if it damages the optic nerve, the vision, as you see here, will be lost gradually, starts at the peripheral and ends at the center. So glaucoma is a group of diseases characterized by increase in the intraocular pressure above the normal. So what is the normal IOP of the eye? How much is the normal? The normal is between 15 to 20 millimeter mercury. Some say it's between 10 and 22 millimeter mercury. So there's a very weird case we found. A patient with IOP 26 and has no glaucoma. What? You say that the normal is between 15 to 20 millimeter mercury, and that patient with IOP 26 and still has no glaucoma. So what is the explanation of that patient? The explanation is that the increase in the IOP must achieve the optic nerve damage. But in that patient, there was no any optic nerve damage that we can see. So we call that case ocular hypertension without glaucoma. Okay, there's an ocular hypertension. The IOP is above the normal, but still no glaucoma. Why? Because there's no optic nerve damage. So, how do I know if the optic nerve is damaged or not? This will be by the structural change, as you see here. So that is a side view for the optic nerve. Okay, this is a normal optic nerve as you see here. What happens when the IOP increases? Okay, you will see that fibers are compressed, and they show their compression like this. So this was originally the optic nerve. After a time, these fibers will be like this, and this will be a space. Okay, so this is the normal fibers here. When there's an increase in the intraocular pressure, that fibers will be compressed in this direction, and it will be like this, and this will be a space. Okay, and that compression of these nerves will lead to the death. So let's see an anterior view for the optic disc. The last one was a lateral view, but this is A anterior view. When you make a gonioscopy, you will see that this is the optic nerve. So let's understand the structure of the optic nerve, okay? So if we made a line here, as you see, that is called the optic disc, okay? Here we go. That is the optic disc, okay? And this here is called the optic cup, okay? Okay, so that whole part, okay, like that one here, all of this is called the optic disc. But this circle is called the optic cup, okay? But that whole thing is called the disc, okay? Okay. And if you focus at this, you would find that that part here, it's called the neuroretinal rim, okay? That part here, that part between here, this is called the neuroretinal rim, okay? So if you focused here, you would see that the neuroretinal rim is more darker than the cup, okay? And why is that? This is a very important question. Why is the cup paler than the neuroretinal rim here, okay? So as we said, there's a disc, there is a cup, and there's a neuroretinal rim. And we said that the cup is more paler than the neuroretinal rim. Why is that? Okay, let's look at this lateral view here. Where's the disc? The disc here starts from here. So that whole part here, that is the disc, okay, okay, and that here, that part here, that is the cup, okay, okay, and that is the neuroretinal rim. So as I said, I told you that the cup was more paler than the neuroretinal rim. Why is that? Look at the cup here. You'll see that the cup represents an area where behind it is there's a space behind it. And I want you to look at this, okay? So if you are looking from here, okay, so this is the retinal rim fibers, okay? So this is the neuroretinal rim fibers, and this is the cup fibers, okay? Okay, so look at the lens here. If you are looking from this point here, you'd find that the lens here and the lens here, compare between them, you'd find that the fibers of the cup are further than the fibers of the neuroretinal rim, right? And there's a very important piece of info you need to know. So when the fibers are further from the point you are seeing, it will become paler, right? So when there is an increase in the IOP, okay, and the pressure of the eye will increase like this, and the pressure will increase like this, you'd find out that these fibers here will be here, right? So it will become more paler, as you see here, right? So if these fibers here that exist right now here, there's a pressure that press them to become here, they will become more paler. So as we said, that is the optic disc. This whole part is called the optic disc, okay? And that pale part here, the lighter part, is called the cup. And we understood why is it pale, because the fibers are further than that part here, which is called the neuroretinal rim. So I want you to focus on the lateral view I showed you here, because this one will explain to you why this part is paler than that part. So why are we seeing all of this? Why are we understanding the structure of the optic nerve? Why are we comparing that there's optic disc, optic cup, and paler area, and there's a darker area? Why is that? Because I want you to look at these two pictures here, okay? You will find out that there's a pale area here. This is the optic cup I'm pointing to. This arrow, this is the optic cup. And this whole part is called the optic disc. And between the optic cup and that line here lies the retinal rim, okay? Darker part and a lighter part, okay, paler part. I want you to look at this picture here that I'm pointing to, okay? You'd find that this is the same patient, but that patient here in that picture, there was an increase in the intraocular pressure, which led to, look at the cup here, it became more wider, okay? It became wider here, okay? And the paler area was, as you see here, it appears more than the darker area, right? So the optic disc increased in size, okay? And the neuroretinal rim decreased in size. And the optic disc is here mainly an optic cup. So, why did that happen? Let's see. So if we looked here, I want you to see that whole part I'm pointing to is the optic disc, okay? And that here, that curved part here is called the optic cup, okay? And the area here is called the retinal rim, okay? And that is the intraocular pressure pressing on the optic nerve or the optic disc, okay? And I want you to focus on the size of the cup, that curved part. This is the cup. Look at the size of the cup. It's like, yes, it's small, right? Okay. So look what happened if that intraocular pressure increases. Look what happened. I want you to see, okay? Oh my God. The size of the cup increased by the increase of the intraocular pressure. Okay, so now let's look at the front view in order to see it, okay? So here is the front view as you see here. This is the optic cup and this whole part is called the optic disc and that dark part is called the neuroretinal rim. So by the increase of the intraocular pressure, look at the side of the cup. Oh, it increases as you see here. By the increase of the intraocular pressure, the size of the cup increases as you see here, and the neuroretinal rim gets more, like it decreases in size. And the cup invades the optic disc as you see here in that front view. So another thing I want to tell you about, look at the nerves here, look at the side view now. You will see that the nerves here are not compressed as you see, they are free as you see here. But look what happens when the intraocular pressure increases. Oh, the nerves here are more compressed and that will lead to the damage of the optic nerve and thus the functional changes and the visual field loss. The third thing here I want to tell you about, look at the front view of the optic disc here, okay? You would see that there's a pale area and there's a dark area, okay? Let's make it smaller here, okay? So there's a pale area which is called the optic disc and there's a dark area. So what is the reason of that? Okay, look at the side view of the optic nerve, okay? So this is the optic cup here in front of you. So that here is the optic cup. That curve here is the optic cup, okay? So if you are looking from here by the gonioscopy, okay, you would see that the nerves of the optic cup are further than the nerves of the neuroretinal rim of the here, okay, of these fibers here, okay? So you will see that these fibers here more clearly than the fibers here. The here will be more darker and he will be paler here, okay? And this is because the optic cup nerves are further than the optic rim, the neuroretinal rim nerves. I want you to look at the front view of the optic nerve here, okay? You would see that this is pale area. Why this is pale and why this is dark? This area is pale because the nerve fibers here are further than the nerve fibers in this area, which is called the neuroretinal rim. So the optic cup nerves are further than the neuroretinal rim fibers, okay? Okay, so what happens when the intraocular pressure increases? Look at the pale area. It will increase, okay? Why, okay? Why? Look at the lateral view now, okay? Why the pale area will increase here? Because look at the fibers here. The fibers are getting more further and further and further and further, so the paler area will increase as you see here. So what do I want to say? What I want to say is that when there's an increase in the intraocular pressure, okay? Here we go, okay. Look at the front view here, you would find that the optic cup will increase in size, okay? Okay. And the paler area will increase in size, okay? And the optic disc will become paler and paler and paler like this. So the front view describes the structural changes that will happen to the optic disc. The increase of the size of the optic cup and the paler area will increase. Okay, okay. So the explanation of that, we should look at the side view. Okay, okay, here we go. So look at the size of the cup here. The intraocular pressure, when it increases, it compresses the nerve fibers. It compresses the nerve fibers away like that. So the size of the cup here will increase. The size of the cup here will increase. Why? Because the intraocular pressure compressed the nerves like that. So the explanation for the pale area is, look at the side view, is because the nerve fibers of the optic cup is further than the nerves of the neuroretinal rim, okay? So when the intraocular pressure increases, look at what happened to the fibers. It becomes more further. It gets more further and further. So the pale area here will increase. The optic cup increased in size. Why is that? Because there was an increase in the intraocular pressure, okay? So the IOP was pressing these nerve fibers here. And they were originally here. But after the compression, the fibers became here. And they became here. Okay? Okay. So these fibers after a time became like that. Yes. Became like that here, as we see here. And that whole part is becoming a space now. There's nothing here. There's no nerve fibers, and all the fibers are compressed in that part. All the fibers are compressed and in that part. Okay, so if there is a point of view here, someone looking from the gonioscopy here, you'd see that nerve fibers now became more further. That nerve fibers became further, as you see here, right? Okay, so when there's the length between the fibers here and the point of view increases, the paler the area becomes. As we said here, these fibers here, as you see, they were closed, okay? But due to the increase in the intraocular pressure by the aqueous humor, okay, the fibers became more further. And when they became more further, they will become more paler, as you see here. Will be more paler. So why are we saying all this? To tell you that the increase in the IOP must lead to an optic nerve damage so that we can say glaucoma. The optic nerve damage is represented in a structural change. What is the structure inside the optic nerve that changed? It is the optic disc. What's changed inside the optic disc? The optic cup becomes more wider. So the structural change of the optic nerve is that two picture in front of you. The optic disc suffers from optic cupping. As you see, the optic cup here increased to be that, and if you saw that, you must say that is glaucoma. That case here is called physiological cupping. The person was born with his optic cup and it was wider, as you see here, and it's not a pathological case. So that tells us that glaucoma is not only by structural changes, right? It's not only by structural changes, because there's physiological cupping, right? But it's also by functional changes. So what is the functional changes? The functional changes are the visual field defects, okay? The visual fields will be affected by the glaucoma and it might lead to a visual loss. So we can't say there is glaucoma by only structural changes. It must be functional changes represented in the visual field defect. So that is a normal visual field. But look what happens when glaucoma strikes. We lose the visual field. And if you notice that we lose it from the peripheral first, the periphery starts losing the visual field and then to the center. So we can say that glaucoma is an increase in the intraocular pressure that led to structural changes, and that structural changes led to functional changes. But guess what? There's a patient with IOP 16. 16 is the normal IOP, okay? But we found out that they are glaucomatous. We found out that there are structural changes that led to functional changes with normal IOP. So let's look at this diagram. So if we said that this rectangle here is the optic nerve or the optic disc, okay? And this part here is the eye, and this part here is the brain. Here is the IOP, the intraocular pressure, okay? Which is pressing here with a certain number, okay? And here is the intracranial pressure, which is pressing here with a certain number, okay? And there is an equilibrium here, okay? But what happened if? Okay, what happened if? So what will happen if the intracranial pressure decreased here, as you see? You'll find out that the normal IOP will increase here, okay? And it will there's been an increase in the pressure on the optic nerve, which will lead to structural change and functional change. And you should know that the IOP here was normal, like 16 and this patient, okay? It's just normal here, 16. But what happened is that the intracranial pressure is the pressure that decreased, okay? So, relatively, the IOP increased. Hey, okay? Not in the number, but in relative to the intracranial pressure. And that increase will lead to A, structural changes, A, functional changes to the optic nerve. So the IOP here, if we are going to say what is glaucoma, we're not going to say it is an increase in the IOP. No, we'd say it's a pathological pressure. Pathological IOP. Because the increase we see here was not the thing that made the optic nerve damage. It was just 16 right here, but there's an intracranial pressure decrease, so that IOP turned from normal to pathological. So after all of this, we can come to a comprehensive definition to glaucoma. Glaucoma triad. It's a pathological intraocular pressure, not increase, but we said pathological IOP. That led to structural changes, okay? Led to structural changes. But not only structural changes, the structural change should lead to a functional change, okay? So if you want to say the definition of glaucoma, a comprehensive definition of glaucoma, you should say it's a pathological IOP that led to structural changes, that structural changes led to a functional change, and you say the details of the structural change are represented in the optic cupping, and the functional changes are represented in the visual field defect and might lead to a visual loss.